Good morning. Today is Monday, February the 1st, and this is a special meeting of the Service Delivery Review Committee, which has been called for the purpose of Strategy Corp Inc. facilitating a consultation workshop with respect to the service delivery review of Oxford County municipalities. Strategy Corp was retained by the County of Oxford to facilitate workshops with each of the 8 area municipalities with respect to the service delivery review prepared by Watson and Associates economist dated April 30th, 2020. This meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238, subsection 3.3 of the Municipal Act and Section 16.6.24 of the City of Woodstock Procedure Bylaw. An agenda of the meeting can be found on the Agenda, Meetings, and Minutes page of the City's website. The meeting is being live streamed to the City's YouTube channel, and a recording of this meeting is also being posted on the City's website following the meeting. The first order of business is to determine a chairperson for the committee. But Councillor Fraser has sent his regrets as he's unfortunately unable to participate this morning. So since we only have 2 members, I will ask if there's a volunteer to chair today.
Yes, I'll volunteer. Connie Lauder, Councillor Lauder.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lauder. So I'll pass it over to you to continue with disclosure of conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of conflict of interest? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the meeting. It's for the Service Delivery Review Workshop. Now I'll pass it over to John Matheson and Michael Fenn to present the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and thank you for convening this session. The clerk gave an excellent summary of why we're here. I'll just, if you permit me, I'll just add a bit. And I'm just going to share my screen here so that you can see the presentation. These were the materials that were circulated to you before. And they also, in addition to this document that's entitled the workbook, this is the cover page of it. I also provided you with a copy of the original Watson report, as well as a commentary by the area CAOs that was prepared in May of last year. The task that was given to us by County Council was to gauge the interest of councils that make up Oxford County in implementing service delivery recommendations from the report. And so for each, we've been asked to ask 4 questions, which really can be summarized as what would make this a good idea? What would make this a bad idea? Overall, is it something you'd be interested in? And do you have anything else to contribute on it? So it's really a sort of a straightforward assessment of interest. And just a word on our role, we were not retained to do an independent analysis of the recommendations. They were prepared by another firm and they've been analyzed by your officials. So it is not our role to comment on whether there ought to be interest in them or not. Our role is to facilitate a collection of your general views about the implementation of the recommendations. And in that regard, it's intended to be of assistance to county officials, because by gauging the interest of the various member municipalities, I think that the goal is to sort of identify what we often refer to as the low-hanging fruit, figure out what the opportunities are to move ahead. It's sort of understood that one of the most disappointing things in public administration is a report that winds up getting shelved. And I think the spirit of this is very much to try and seek opportunities, positive opportunities of things that could be done together. And a couple of really important points, though. I would say it's fair to say that none of the specific recommendations included in the Watson report, and similarly, none of the commentary by the CAOs would constitute the last word that you would need in order to be able to move ahead. And so our role is to facilitate your general views and interests based on your current familiarity with them. So because of that, no specific decisions are expected. In this regard, it's a little different from what one normally does, where you have a fully baked proposal in front of you and you analyze it to its fullest extent and make a decision. This is actually a much earlier step in the process of canvassing general interest. And I should also just emphasize the premise of the workshop is that everything that we're discussing is focused on service delivery and not on governance. And so it's understood that any of these proposals for service delivery improvement are within the existing overarching governance framework. So that's the essence of the task at hand, but just to sort of put a finer point on it, I think what we're trying to do here, and it's worked pretty well in the other workshops that we've had, so you are in no respects the guinea pigs on this one. We've done this, I think, already in 6 of the area municipalities. If you think of it as coming up with some general principles that can help guide staff of all of the various Oxford municipalities, but particularly the county, in what kinds of proposals would be welcome to kind of get a sort of strategic level pre-clearance on where the interest level is. And if you think about statements like any service delivery proposal should at least deliver these benefits, or any service delivery proposal should respect these boundaries, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, because that's what flows from what I already mentioned, that none of these things are necessarily developed to the extent that that we can get much more specific than that. But we will take all of your comments. We'll see if there's consensus. If there isn't, that's fine, because we will report a divided view. I mean, we're really just trying to gauge initial interest here. And over the course of the workshop, which is intended to be interactive, this is my friend, the virtual yellow sticky, and I will be taking real-time notes. I'll also be editing them afterwards for spelling. But the important point is I'm going to try and get down your general thoughts about things. If you think I missed the gist of what you were trying to say, I would view it as a favor if you told me. It's not my job to put words in your mouth. It's really what I'm trying to do is accurately reflect what it is that you do think. And, sometimes the verbal communication isn't as reflective as what you might say if you were writing it out. So the job by the end is to get it so we do know what you think, and I will consider it not a correction, but actually you assisting me in doing the job if at any time you want me to adjust one of the yellow stickies that I'm working on. So unless there's any questions, we can proceed. Well, I'm not hearing any questions. I should just take a moment to introduce my colleague, Michael Fenn, who is here with me. Michael, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, just I'm pleased to have an opportunity to participate and look forward to the comments that members of council are going to bring to this discussion.
Thanks, Michael. So diving right in, and I should say we've found that the task fits nicely inside 2 hours with relatively few members of council here today. It might go a little bit quicker, and I know no one is ever offended by a meeting moving more quickly than projected, but we'll try and move it along. So with that in mind, let me move to the next slide. This is by way of a bit of introduction to the task, but also a bit of a refresher on the contents of the Watson report. As you know, it contained 2 major buckets, if you will, of opportunities. Opportunities for outright cost saving and opportunities for service improvements. Of the cost saving opportunities, there were 5 that were offered an upside of greater than $40,000. There were also a considerable number of smaller initiatives that were smaller in nature. It's our intention to focus primarily on the 5 initiatives of greater than $40,000, just for sort of obvious reasons. There were also opportunities that weren't so much about savings, but that were either just about coordination that would not require additional investment, or coordination that, or sorry, opportunities for improvements that would require additional investment. The last category is the most difficult to deal with because they're literally spending proposals. You could call them a wish list, or you could call them a needs list. But because they're about spending new money, they're in many respects the most difficult to deal with this in a kind of strategic level format that we have today, as opposed to having all the detailed business case. So we will tend to not focus on that one as much, and we'll put the main focus on the 5 initiatives of greater than $40,000. Now, jumping into those, there are 5 of them, as I said, and they account for 96% of the identified savings in the report. So from a point of view of the 80-20 rule, we actually exceed the 80-20 rule by 16%. Like if you were to just do these 5 things, you'd get 96% of the savings in the report, or at least have the opportunity to realize the vast majority of the report. So these really are the main areas of focus. And what I'll do is I'll go through each of the 5. I know you can read faster than I can talk, so I won't read these 5 at you, but we'll put an area of focus on each one of these 5. And for each, you probably noticed in the workbook that the slides are in pairs. And so for each, what I've done is I've introduced it with a extract from the joint CAO report from May of 2020. And again, this was sort of like a consensus report of all of the CAOs from the Oxford area, the snapshot of their views on things taken at that time in commentary on the Watson report. And then the second slide in each pair is a place for me to take your comments with the virtual yellow stickies. So I'll just dive in and we can see how the first one works. The roads and bridges was the subject of the first of the recommendations. As you can see, it offered savings in the sort of $50,000 to $150,000 range. It was meant to potentially be a benefit of all of the municipalities. The essence of this one was that there would be a detailed review of the service provisions for operations in regard to the maintenance of roads. And so what the CAOs commented on when they looked at it was they said, look, this is one of the bigger ones. People have talked about this in the past, and they described the recommendation as doing a detailed, specific study on the benefits of local municipalities, assuming the day-to-day maintenance and responsibilities of county roads within their jurisdiction. And then those duties would be transferred to the local municipality. They would be funded by the county levy and undertaken to county servicing standards. Now, at the capital side of the job, though, replacement and that sort of thing would remain under the care and control of the county. So this is literally about taking a look at whether moving from 2 sets of crews, maintaining roads, a county crew, and then an area local municipality crew, could be made more efficient by having it go to 1 crew in regard to the maintenance. And when the CAOs looked at this, they actually found favor with it, and that they recommended conducting the detailed review that would be necessary to build the specific business case for doing this. So it's a good one to start on because it's a meaningful sum of money, and it's about a transfer of service responsibility from the county to the area municipalities. So the questions I have for you really are, as anticipated, these basically are the 4 questions. What would make this look successful to you? What would make it look less interesting to you? Overall, does it seem like a good thing to do? And are there any other comments? And with that, I would open the floor to any initial comments that any of the members of council might have in regard to your thoughts on this. And I see Councillor Tate.
Yeah, just one comment. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have 2 different, their level of service and our level of service are 2 complete different things when it's coming to do, say, like snow removal for the roads. So there's maybe an issue with that. I think that, I know I talked to one of the other mayors, and his concern was they wouldn't be able to afford to do their own snow removal, because by the time you buy the equipment, etc. So just a comment.
Did you, I mean, we're talking to all the other mayors, so I don't want to mix their comments about what they think with yours about what you think about how it would apply to Woodstock. Do you think this could potentially be of interest to Woodstock?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's a big cost saving, so yes.
Other comments?
Yes, I agree with Woodstock, certainly, because just as Councillor Tate has said, our services and our needs here in Woodstock are totally different than in the rural and maybe even the other two urbans. We have snow service 24 hours a day in storms, where in the rurals, they don't have that. So I think this is really important that this study's done. And it also might help identify, we have county roads that's looked after by the county and the city. And when people will say, for instance, Devonshire, oh, there's something wrong on Devonshire. Well, then we have to say, oh, that's a county issue. And it's very difficult for people to understand. We're in the city, and what is this under the city and what is under the county. So I think that this would be good to clarify these issues for the city.
Other comments? Just to sort of moving to the general principles, and some of this might seem a bit obvious, but our goal is to try and achieve some general principles for the benefit of staff. When we say it could be a big cost savings, can we just unpack that a little bit? Like the reason we're interested in is because it's like, is it fair to say, is it because it's going to maintain our levels of service, but potentially have the overall service be done at a lower cost? Or what is it that makes it interesting to you?
I think it's one thing is the identification of who's responsible for what within the city. And I don't know as the cost saving, because I haven't been in on any studies, and I think that's why we need the study to see is there a cost saving.
So we need to.
John, maybe I can jump in here. Our council hasn't seen the budget proposal for 2021 yet. We're still putting it together. It includes $20,000 to undertake this study. The area municipal CAOs all agreed that we would budget for the cost of undertaking this more detailed study in our 2021 budgets. And our council just hasn't seen that yet. The idea would be that we would put all this money into one big pot, and the study would undertake a very detailed analysis of the scenario whereby the county delivery of maintenance services on county roads devolves to the area municipal level. And in so doing, it has to have regard for the differences in the level of service between the rural and the urban, as well as the disposition of the county assets. And so it's a very, I think it's a complex, detailed study in order to get to the root of, is this going to result in either better service or lower cost for the taxpayer? So it remains to be seen. And in terms of funding, it also remains to be seen whether the recent announcement with the municipal modernization funding that was came out at Roma last week could be an opportunity to find funding for undertaking that study.
And are there any other elements of the evaluative criteria that you recall from that Woodstock, was that were important to Woodstock in thinking about that study? I mean, you were talking about overall cost benefit and maintenance of standards and that kind of thing, and disposition of county assets and respect for the different standards levels. Are there any other key criteria that are important?
Nothing that comes to mind. I think to be fair in the analysis, though, the difficulty will be trying to get an apples to apples comparison where you're dealing with levels of service. And Councillor Lauder raised the snow clearing as just one example where Woodstock clears snow 24/7, and yet the county does not provide overnight winter maintenance services on its county roads. And so it makes the comparison of costs very difficult and requires more detailed study. So I can't think of anything further. One of the other complicating factors is the assets. Who do the county assets go in this model? Where do the road patrol yards go? Which township takes ownership of them under this type of a scenario? So there's a lot of questions that need to be worked out. Assumptions need to be made in order to make the determination of whether or not this is good for the taxpayer. But I think on the surface, it's fairly intuitive to believe that there is value here where you have two road authorities with duplication of both vehicle assets as well as property assets in the form of road patrol yards for the rural roads, the local roads, and separately for the county roads. So intuitively, it seems to make sense that there should be savings and even potentially service improvements resulting from this type of an analysis.
And can I just ask, does council or does Woodstock have a view as to right now whether there's a priority on the savings side or the service improvement side, or is it just a sort of a balanced interest in both?
As I would say, sorry to interrupt you, David, but I would say as a counselor, it's important for savings, but as a counselor, I wouldn't vote for the savings if it gave up on service delivery. And our service delivery is excellent. So the concern is the level that the county may be doing.
I would certainly agree there that both the taxes, if we can save on taxes, but we can't just save on taxes to lose the service that we already have, because that just would not go over with our taxpayers, I'm sure.
John, it's Michael, can I go back to Councilor Lauder's previous comment about the calls that council members get from people, particularly during winter events? Is there an opportunity, the CAO mentioned about the opportunity to look at service standards, I guess to harmonize service standards with, at least within the city boundaries. Is that something that makes sense? I mean, regardless of whether you proceed with the savings idea, is there something that can be done on the harmonization of services, or at the very least some mechanism so that if people have a complaint that it's handled expeditiously and you don't get this that's not my job, it's his job kind of response?
John, I think to answer that, most of the county roads within the city are maintained by the city. So this is actually in place in the city for the most part. The one exception would be there are some boundary roads that are county roads that have formed part of recent boundary adjustments that have not been brought under this this agreement that the city has with the county where we do that work. So this isn't necessarily something that is in the city. This is primarily being done now. It's just not being done everywhere else in the county.
The other thing that I was thinking of is if there's construction, say for instance on Devonshire, and that I can just relate to what was going on this past summer with the construction there, and then people are complaining, oh, it's the city, it's always the city, they're so slow, or they're not doing the job they're supposed to. But the city, that was a county project. So that's where I'm coming from, not so much the snow removal or things like that in the city, but there's other issues too. It's not not just snow. So that's more of what I was relating to, or the potholes all down Van Sittard Ave or whatever. And then, oh, that's always the city's fault. But people don't realize that it's the county. So that's more where I was coming from.
Yeah.
John,
No,
can I
that's-
turn one of the questions around and ask David, perhaps, is there any experience that you had as a result of the fact that you do the maintenance on the county roads? Any lessons to be learned in terms of the work we're doing to recommend things back to the county? Do you have any issues over, the way in which costs are allocated or the way in which standards are applied and things of that kind that would help us in giving advice back to the county about if you decide to go down this road, what kinds of things would be, things you've learned along the way in your experience that might be applied to others?
John or Michael, I think the city has a long-standing agreement. It's probably 30 plus years old, and the method of calculation of cost sharing for county roads, it's a simple arithmetic division of the total lane kilometers of county roads into the total lane kilometers of city roads, and we simply divvy up our costs of road maintenance, and it's billed to the county annually. So it's very simple. City council gets to establish and set the level of service on all roads within its jurisdiction, including those county roads. And there has historically been no intervention by the county on asserting a lower level of service or any other level of service. And I think that would be something that needs to be worked out if this is going to be introduced more broadly throughout the county, that the question of level of service should be dealt with. Can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
So just so I'm clear, so the city crews maintain city or do snow clearance on city roads and on county roads within the city limits now, is that right? Overnight?
Yes.
Overnight.
Yes. Yes. And then there's some exceptions where, as I say, there are some boundary roads that where county roads have come within the jurisdiction of the city through boundary adjustments in recent years where they remain. There is some agreements where we have with the county where the county will plow certain city roads because it makes sense from a, instead of dead ending road runs, they will do some of our roads. So there is road clearing rationalization that happens as a matter of course between road superintendents. So that also happens and has always happened.
And that's a sort of a best practice, I think, when you have staff that are seeking opportunities of that kind. And I guess what you're saying is Woodstock is no stranger to this sort of rationalization exercise. And if the business case makes sense, then you're happy to participate in it. And if it doesn't, then you'll take a different view, but it'll be driven not based on, two-tier politics, but based on just straight business case of what gets the right mix of service and cost. Is that a fair way to summarize your overall position?
I think it would be from a staff perspective. I think it makes sense. The rural road departments have the staff and the equipment and the expertise to be able to deliver the same services they do on their local roads on county roads. The rural road departments, I think, could do with more staffing that would come if they had a greater responsibility for more roads within their jurisdiction. The road budgets within a rural township make up the majority of the budget of that township, and it's where the majority of their assets and their staff resource exist. And so, if they are assuming more responsibility through a agreement with the county to do county roads, then that should bring them more resources that they have the ability to do other things within their service areas.
Any other questions on this one, Michael? Let's jump on to the second one, unless anyone else has any comments they want to make on this. This is really useful because what you've done is you've kind of given us your general principles, I think, about what would make for a good proposal. You know, it would be about a balance of savings or improvements. It would be business case driven. It would respect service delivery standards and really respect them, like really understand what makes sense. It would also respect existing labor department, like staffing issues. And in some cases, it might overburden, as I think Councillor Tate said, in some cases, it might put a burden on a municipality without creating the volume that it would allow it to hire extra resources. In other cases, it might allow the consolidation of service might actually benefit the service delivery responsibility. And then I think this notion that with over 30 years of experience in this isn't something new, that you already have a track record of collaboration. It happens at the staff level. It's not surprising when it does. It's business case driven, and if there's more opportunities, we should pursue them. This is kind of what I'm hearing in general coming out of the conversation. Is am I hitting any sour notes for you at all in that? Kind of, if it makes sense, we should do it. In a lot of cases, we already are. Oh, and I'm sorry. I don't think I emphasized enough the public confusion over who does what piece. Is that a pretty good summary of where we're at, though, for the first one? Because I think you may find that there's a fair bit of repetition as we go through the other proposals. And so getting the first one right saves all kinds of time on the other four.
Yes, I think that's a good summary of what we are looking at and you're looking at for answers to this. So thank you on that summary.
Yeah, I agree. This is probably the biggest one, so it's fine.
Any other comments? Okay, let's jump on to the second one. The second one relates to two different ideas related to Parks and Rec. One is one that we will see throughout the rest of the report again and again and again, which is it's a coordinated purchasing or bulk purchasing or collaborative purchasing arrangement. And the other is a user fee cost recovery analysis. And so basically the consultants are saying you could save money by doing more bulk purchasing. And they're saying you're leaving some money on the table because you don't have harmonized user fees. So if we should probably split this into two different concepts. So the CAOs, when they considered it, they said, look, each municipality says is already largely doing their own user fee bylaws, and that they should continue to have their own regular master plan reviews, determine their levels of service, and determine their usual fees. And so that in regard to the fees, it was sort of, no, we're not so interested in coordinating them. Thank you very much. In regard to the purchasing, the observation from the CAOs was, well, look, we're already doing coordinated purchasing, and that each municipality should continue to do so and participate in coordinated purchasing on commonly required things when it matters, like when it seems to make sense. So perhaps I can ask you what you think about the bulk purchasing first, because bulk purchasing is laced through this whole report. And if we can get your basic principles on that, then we can, that'll save time through the rest of the analysis too. And then we can turn to the user fee question as a second thing. But any comment, are we in favor of bulk purchasing where it makes sense?
Yes, I would be in favor of it. Definitely, if it makes sense to be able to do this. I really don't have any more comments on that.
Yeah, it's a bit like going to Costco, I guess.
Okay. I agree, but I don't think there's going to be anything there for us, to be honest with you. I think this one is kind of a waste, but just my thoughts on it.
And is that because you're already doing it? Oh, I'm sorry, you're on mute, Council.
Sorry, we already do it as a municipality, so.
Are there any red flags about it? Because when we talk about it, purchasing, if it makes sense, and I hear you loud and clear that you may already be doing it as much as you can. But are there any red flags that help identify when it doesn't make sense?
John, one of the issues that comes up, maybe not specifically in Parks and Recreation, but it can particularly in areas like IT, that bulk purchasing usually requires some agreement on standards. So you end up specifying certain kinds of products or processes or materials that in some cases may not be what you're currently using, or may require you to buy a little more than you would have under other circumstances, to use your Costco example, things of that kind.
Any concerns that arise out of that? Or you were commenting on the difference in service standards between Woodstock and some of the other municipalities. Is that something you've bumped into on the purchasing side of things?
I would think this is something maybe staff would comment on. I don't see it, but maybe staff could comment.
Yeah, and I would say that that would be up to staff too, because we have so many facilities that the other municipalities don't have. Again, it's the same thing, that Woodstock being the largest urban, like maybe we need different items for cleaning or for the different facilities. So I think that certainly would be something that staff would be more attuned to than me commenting on that.
Yeah, I think our counselors have hit all of the relevant points already. I get to say, as staff, we pursue coordinated purchasing when it makes sense. The difficulty with Parks and Recreation is that this is really a difficult one to do that with our neighbors. I mean, we do coordinated purchasing, bulk purchasing for natural gas and things like that. That's not with our neighbors. So as a matter of practice, we do, but it's difficult in this particular area to find things that we can join together to put out larger tenders. You know, we have, as Councillor Louder put, the largest range of services in our Parks and Recreation assets. We offer, I'm fairly certain, we offer the broadest range of programming for recreation services as well. And I just don't see there being much to be found here.
Has there been any bulk purchasing associated with COVID, like for cleaning supplies and things of that kind? Have you found you can get what you need, or do you think that you could do better if you did it countywide? Any of those kinds of considerations? No, I haven't heard of any coordinated purchasing for COVID supplies. We haven't had any difficulty with accessing the PPE that we need. We've been finding prices, better prices each time we go to market to restock. We have helped other municipalities with who we're using to purchase from, and I know they've gone and made purchases of their own. Yeah, we haven't. I mean, from our perspective, we're able to purchase in the volumes that attract the lower prices, and that's what we've been doing.
We sometimes hear about buying local and some concern about not wanting to necessarily give up the ability to buy local. Is that part of your purchasing equation as a community, or is that, or is it more the lowest price is the law, as I think somebody says sometimes? We
definitely try to use local where where it's possible. But, you know, I'm sure you're aware we're using taxpayer dollars, and we have to have respect for the taxpayer dollar and seek out the best value. And sometimes that just isn't local.
Can I ask then, any other comments on bulk purchase? Because it sounds like you've got that one well in hand. And it sounds like what you'd say is, well, yes, of course, we're broadly supportive of it if it makes sense, so much so that we think we're already doing it pretty widely. Presumably, if you found something else where it did make sense, you'd be all in for it. But you're not necessarily optimistic that there's a big pot of gold here because a lot of it's already being done. Is that a pretty good estimate of where you're at? Okay. So can I just ask on the other point that was woven through this one was all about the user fees. Any thoughts on the user fee thing?
I don't think that we can have coordinated user fees because, again, our municipality, our city, has so many different programs that other municipalities don't have. Our costs could be higher or lower. Staffing wages are different. I don't see that would benefit us at all, but that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Lauder. I don't even think that's anywhere we should even go, to tell you the truth.
John, one issue that comes up sometimes when the city and the surrounding county have, you know, quite noticeably different levels of service in recreation and parks and culture and things of that kind, is you get a bit of an influx of people from other municipalities coming in to use your facilities. Is there anything in your fee structure that speaks to that issue? I know it comes up, say, in libraries and places like that as well.
I don't think there is. I know I sit on the grants committee, and I know that some of our applications that come in, we will look at how many are from the outlying communities and how many are from the city. But we always like to have more from the city, of course, than if we're going to be issuing money for them in a grant. So, but I don't think that I think maybe on some of the hockey and teams and the ice structure, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that outside teams maybe pay more than teams from within. But I don't think there's a lot of that.
Yes, John, we do use the affiliate and non-affiliate pricing structure for our user fees. So if somebody is booking, let's say, ice for an individual purpose, and they do not live in the city, they would pay a different price than if you were from the city. So that would be the non-affiliate. So there is some distinction between resident, non-resident. When you get into user groups like minor hockey and whatnot, what ends up happening is there's an assessment of whether or not that particular league is on balance from the community, from the city, or not. And if the majority of them of the registrants are from the city, they will get affiliate status and they will get lower the city pricing for the booking. And when it comes to the setting of user fees, the reality is that you have to have regard for the user fees of your neighboring municipalities. If you don't, what you end up having is the user groups will migrate to the cheapest facility, and then your facility gets booked up, and you now have a case on your hands where you have demand to build a second ice arena, which doesn't, certainly impacts the tax levy when you're building another ice arena. So you have to be competitive. When you set your user fees, you have to be outward looking, and not just into your neighboring municipalities, but into the neighboring cities that surround you. So Brantford and London, because user groups, sport groups will travel for the best price.
You were so competitive on the operating costs that you got yourself into having to build a whole new arena is not necessarily a successful strategy. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, and then I guess the other point too, that we needn't quote the municipal act to each other, but since fees are meant to be cost recovery, it'd be pretty tough to harmonize without having due regard for the municipal act. So I think there's some issues there that are part of the wallpaper that has to be dealt with in this situation too. Any other comments on this one? Okay, well, I feel a bit like somebody who's running a book club who's already read the book 5 or 6 times and talking to some people who are new to it. The 2 big concepts in there, or the 2 biggest ideas, are just collaboration generally and specific collaboration around bulk purchasing. I think you'll find the others will move fairly quickly now. The solid waste management, this one is really another instance of bulk purchase. The first thing is a recommendation to consider combining contracts, and then, like the other one, there's a second separate piece. It was about reconsidering the fees associated with large item collection to try and manage the costs associated with having to go clean up stuff when people do improper dumping and all that kind of thing. So focusing on the first, there's a recognition that Woodstock and Southwest Oxford have waste collection under agreements, and there's a recognition that those agreements have different end dates and that they haven't been harmonized in the past. The general suggestion was, boy, perhaps you should try and harmonize them in due course, having regard to the realities of contracting and such. And so that was the one concept. And, at a strategic level, it would be to move in the direction of harmonizing if and as possible. I don't think it was so crass as to say, or as to ignore the realities of existing contracts, but it was even to say, if we thought it was a good idea to move towards harmonization in due course, then we might plan for harmonization of contracts, if and as possible, even if that's 5 or 6 years down the road. The second one, and sorry, when the CAOs looked at that, they concluded that there wasn't any consensus that there was a need to roll these separate contracts into one county-wide contract. And then in regard to the bag tag system, the commentary on that said that the system of bag tag user pay along with the large article should be reviewed to identify potential for improvements to both systems, but there was no particular recommendation there. So firstly, any thoughts on, to the degree that this is another instance of bulk purchasing? I think I already know what you think about bulk purchasing, but anything specific about it as it relates to the solid waste side of things?
No, I don't have anything. I agree. We have separate contracts, and I would never relook at those contracts, especially the one that ours is set up.
Yes, and I think that was looked at a few years ago, and we stayed with what we were doing. And I think that if people are satisfied with it and we have a good system. I don't know about the tickets. I don't know if you want that right now, but I was just reading about the tags for large items. I think that might cause a problem again, because people then are having to put a tag on it, and again, they'll throw it out in the country or throw it wherever they want, rather than paying when we've already got that system right now. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Other comments?
And when you ask about the pluses, I think that people just really, really like this environment, the depot that we have. and being able to take the recycling down to the Jane Street property. That's all good, and I received lots of comments on that, how wonderful that service is for our citizens.
Okay. Nice to hear. It certainly is a growing interest on trying to minimize waste of all kinds. Any other thoughts on this one that might help the county? I guess if I were to summarize this as, look, the contracts are the contracts and our service currently is good. So there'd be a fairly high burden for us to be interested in changing things. Is that a...
I would agree with that. And I think also when Councillor Lauder hit on the bulk item, the tags for that, then you've got administration costs and a change with that. So I agree. I don't see any cost savings there. Probably create more work.
But I guess, is it also fair to say that, you know, Woodstock's always happy to listen to a business case, but right now this isn't one that you would view as being optimistic? Or
yeah, I would agree with that. I will say we've always had a problem with the county with our waste collection, so I wouldn't even go there with them because we do it quite efficiently as it is. Their system maybe is not as efficient as ours, so I mean, obviously we would always be open to cost savings, but I can't see it.
I would agree.
I think if you think that's a pretty fair, we're always interested in a business case, but this is not the one to start on because people really like it. It works. If that's fair, I think that's nice, clear feedback to the county. And, you know, the value of this is in, you know, deciding what's a great place to start that's productive and what's a place that just don't go there, like you put it, Councilor Tate. So.
Yeah, to me, this is a non-issue with the county. And honestly, this whole process, even going back to the county, they're not going to listen to Woodstock anyways. We can put whatever we want in and they're still not going to listen to it. So I understand the process, but like this is a prime example. We have delivered it cheaper year after year and they argue with us year after year. So.
Okay. Sorry, just catching up with ideas here. Don't want to have anything slip through our fingers. Any other comments on this one, or we can move along? We're doing pretty well on time, so thank you for this. This one is interesting, but it doesn't really relate to you because it's a recommendation around the consolidation of the rural and non-Woodstock police service boards. This one recognizes that you have your own, and so it doesn't really apply. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it unless you have any general observations on it. But the idea was that some of the other municipalities who currently have their own police services boards could combine in order to reduce the overall burden of meetings and such, and some of the administrative costs associated with them. When the CAOs considered this, they said, look, this might be a good idea, but it's likely to become a legislative requirement from the province anyway. So if it does, we'll do it then, but we won't take any immediate action. But again, it was recognized that it didn't relate to Woodstock directly. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one. Otherwise, we can move along.
No, I think as you're saying, and what has been said, that the province is going to be looking after this anyhow, and it doesn't concern us.
This may be the nicest, tightest answer I've had in 7 meetings so far. Look at that. Any other comments?
Looks good.
If I were in the business of giving out gold stars, you might have just gotten one of them. So this one is about sharing, and it's about the sharing of specialized maintenance equipment for the maintaining of trails. And when the CAOs discussed it, it was generally agreed that sharing is good, and that all municipalities should work towards sharing specialized equipment wherever possible to save funds and reduce duplication, and particularly in purchasing. So it's sort of like a cousin of shared procurement, except it's about sharing what you've already bought rather than collaborating at the time of purchase. Any comment on the sharing file?
I can understand the sharing, but what I don't understand is who do they expect? Say, for instance, if we have the equipment, we have so many trails here and they are beautiful trails. And so we have the specialized equipment that the others may need, would like. And so then is the intent to lease it to them, or so that we're not just purchasing it and other ones can use it? I'm not just clear on what they're talking about here.
Right. I do believe the purchase was, or sorry, the purpose was to have a sharing arrangement whereby there'd be appropriate chargeback. And I think appropriate chargeback would have to include not just the gasoline that it might have cost to run the machine, but also the wear and tear on the machine, and its depreciation that comes from a few more hours of being operated.
Okay, that clarifies that. And if it works for them, and if it works for our staff, then and if there's a saving somewhere, then I guess it's okay. But it's really up to our staff too, I think.
Go
To what
ahead.
extent are your trails even city trails? I mean, the Conservation Authority or volunteer groups or other people maintain any of the physical infrastructure?
It's fine. They're the only, if there's anyone maintaining them, it would be some of the upper Thames, but David, if you can tell me, step in here again. I think we are doing all our own trails, but please say if I'm wrong, David.
No, you're correct, Councillor Lauder. The trails are maintained by city staff. The trails that are located in some cases on the Conservation Authority land, we have an agreement for the South Shore Trail with the Conservation Authority where they will do the basic maintenance, but we do all of the capital improvements to those trails. The remainder of all of the trails in the city are both capital as well as operating maintenance done by city forces exclusively.
David, I just wonder if I could ask, is it a general thing that Woodstock already does, that you've got positive staff relationships with your neighbors and where there's appropriate sharing? Is that something that already goes on?
Yeah, John, absolutely. It's not just in trails. I mean, it happens. Woodstock has a Vector truck. Norwich will need a Vector truck to clear a plug culvert. They call us. We share it. You know, Woodstock has street sweepers that others will call, sometimes needing use of. You know, a recent example last year is Woodstock needed help with a fire apparatus and brought in Ingersoll for a fire that occurred last year, and Ingersoll shared their fire apparatus with Woodstock, and so this has gone on forever, but it's been in an informal way. And the CAOs have been talking about formalizing that in the form of an agreement. And so that conversation's begun, so that it's I guess it's a little bit more transparent than the way we've done things in the past.
So that would lead more to the chargeback kind of concept as opposed
Right.
to just sharing it out of the goodness of your heart. Okay. Any other comments on this one? Okay. So congratulations, you have got through the first 5, which are the 96%. And I just want to sort of cross-check what we've got so far, because this is something better to do the sort of summary now than wait till the end. We already kind of went over what your general thoughts were in regard to the roads and bridges, and I think so far I have not heard a single "we're not interested in working with the other guys," except insofar as it's case specific, because you already feel like you understand the file. But generally, there's no not interested in collaborating with your partners. It's got to be business case driven. Business case is like with a capital B and a capital C. It's got to take in service levels. It's got to take into effect savings. It's got to take into account like practical matters about service standards and impact on staff and all that kind of thing. So it's a broad interest, and I think it's fair to say that what you sort of if it's okay, what I'd like to be able to report back is we never heard that Woodstock would not be interested in a business case driven proposal, because that's the real critical one, because as long as you guys are totally open for collaborative business, then that creates the safe zone for staff to be creative every single day of the, like, not just when you're doing a service delivery review, but every single day of the year. And so as long as I'm not putting words in your mouth there, and I heard you loud and clear on the waste, and the reason I think it's safe to say this, notwithstanding the caution on the waste, was there you even said, well, it's not that we wouldn't be interested, it's just that we think we know this file really well and we're just not sure what could be said, so start on other things that are more productive. But if I've got that right, then we can move on to the second category, but I'm happy to take any other thoughts that might have occurred to you now that you've thought it through in like 5 different contexts. Does this still seem to reflect your overall view on things?
Yes, I think so. I don't think we can improve on it anymore. At least I can't. So
No, I agree. I think you've captured it.
Perfect. So let's just dash ahead, and I think you'll find that we're through the worst of it now. Not that any of it's been all that bad, I hope, but the smaller initiatives. This is 10 smaller initiatives that have a combined upside of up to $30,000. So that's a combined upside of $30,000. So you know, no dollar is too small. No taxpayer dollar is too small to save. But there's a reason why I put all of these on one page instead of giving each one its own page, because they're significantly smaller. And what I've done in each case is instead of giving it its own page and giving you the whole CAO recommendation, each one got its own line, and I just gave you a quick summary of what the CAO said. But in case, you know, for your convenience, I also put the page references in case you wanted to take a look at it again. But given that in some cases we're talking about splitting $1,200 between 8 municipalities, like you know, some of these things are pretty small potatoes. So I can kind of group them for you a bit to accelerate this. And I think the main benefit of looking at this isn't to get into the weeds on any of them. It's to just see if anything occurs to you that hasn't already occurred to you in the big 5, if anything pops up. But we don't need to sort of do a detailed line by line here. 4 of them, the ones that I've highlighted in yellow, are actually just more instances of our friend coordinated purchasing. And so there was, joint tendering on animal control and looking for a single billing provider on water and wastewater, and doing some coordinated purchasing on cemeteries. And so, and in each case, you can see the CAOs I typically said we might as well just keep the status quo on this one. So those did not find a lot of favorable comment, I think, because of their specific circumstance. But the way I would interpret that is, if it did make sense, you'd already be doing it, or you'd be happy to do it. But in these particular instances, the specific recommendations seem to be a bit of a stretch. I think that was the gist of it. But that's the only way you can sort of square the general interest in bulk purchasing with the sort of specific, let's not bother in this case. So I don't know if anybody has any comment on those. Otherwise, I'll pop on to the next. And hearing none, and I'm just seeing I need to grab some yellow stickies here. The second category is about sharing or coordinating on capital optimization. So it's both on wastewater and coordination of ambulance and fire. In other words, potentially doing co-location. And it may be slightly unfair to have put these on the small ticket page. It's just that no specific saving was identified, but obviously saving money on capital can be significantly more than $1,200 divided several ways. So this is no small thing, but in both cases, the gist of it was that yes, there ought to be capital plan optimization and working together to facilitate joint construction where possible. So those two were endorsed to that degree. And I don't know if anybody has any comment on those. The third category, this one's a little more interesting insofar as this is about land use planning. And this is about, right now you've got a local planning meeting, and then you've got a county level planning meeting. And the recommendation is, as a red tape reduction measure and streamlining of the process of land use planning approvals, the idea is that the county delegate its public meeting to the local level, and that you have one combined meeting for the two, instead of making everybody do the same meeting twice, but once through the town and once through the county for the same application. And so that one isn't so much a tendering thing or a planning thing as it is a hardcore operating thing, streamlining to speed up the process. Is there interest in that one?
Yeah, I think definitely. And Connie and Councillor Ladder and I had this discussion last night. When a planning application comes to a specific municipality, when it comes to county, you're not voting against it anyway. So it is a repetition. I'd like to see that looked at. It should be done at the lower level. There's no reason for it to be done at 2 levels. I think it saves staff time too.
I would totally agree. I sit in on some of the county council meetings. I'm not on county council, but it just seems like a useless state. I've listened to it at our county, at our city level, and then I go and hear it again at the county, and then if I hear something from Ingersoll or any of the other municipalities, I think, why am I going to vote against anything that they've already approved or not approved in their municipality? And who is it? Why would city councilors want to go against what has the recommendation from that planning? So I think that it's down at the lower level. It's much better, and let each municipality do their own, and saves time and all that having and duplication especially for people that have to go and sit in these meetings. They've already sat it in at the lower level, and then they have to go to the county. So it just, I think it would cut red tape.
The other ones are largely related to the rural municipalities. The one we haven't spoken to is on emergency management. there was some question of whether there needed to be additional coordination from the county to assist in emergency management planning. But when the CAOs considered it, they thought that that should be left to the local municipalities to arrange, because I don't think it was viewed as being of universal interest. So that one I think might have been a greater interest to some of the smaller townships than a place like Woodstock. And I should just invite David. I don't want to do injustice to any of these recommendations, David, if you think any of them are worth calling out more specifically, but we were just trying to group them in a way that was time efficient, given that they're relatively modest in size and yield and such, and to some degree are repetitive of concepts we've already discussed. But is there anything here that you think should be called out that we haven't?
John, there was in the joint purchase of IT services for building, there's an underlying issue there where a few years ago, the county decided to buy the Amanda business software. And Amanda is primarily a building department business process software. The county made the decision to buy it and then offered to make it available to area municipalities if they so chose to use it, proposing that they would fund this through the county levy, and we would simply all pay for it through the county levy, whether we use it or not. So there was no formal request of the area municipalities as to whether or not they had interest in this. It was simply a decision of county to move forward with it. But the city has since moved forward with switching to the use of Amanda. But Amanda is a very costly, it's definitely a Cadillac solution for building department business process management. And as you know, building, any costs associated with the delivery of building department services is supposed to be funded by the building permit fee revenue. And that's simply not the case here. The county levy is paying to support the costs of Amanda, when in my belief, it should be the area municipalities through their building permit revenue should be paying for that cost. And so I think what the county should be doing here is saying, if you want to use this system, here's your share of the cost. You should make that part of your building permit fee calculations, because you need to forward this amount of money to the county, and it needs to come off the tax levy. That may cause some municipalities to get off of Amanda because it might be a frightfully big bill every year. But that's the way building department costs are supposed to be funded, not by the taxpayer, but by the user.
That's really interesting. And like you say, there is a way to have the cost be recovered, but it would need to be done differently than it's currently being done now. And that could transform this into a more significant saving if the county's currently bearing a fairly significant cost.
And the only other thing, and it really didn't get picked up in the study, is the city is a operator of the linear assets for water and wastewater. So the county is the owner of those assets, but under a contract agreement, the city maintains all of these linear assets, and for a variety of reasons, that's worked well for us since restructuring. We've basically been responsible for these linear assets, and we have a contract with the county, and it works well. But recently, and more recently, we're bumping up against level of service friction with the county, where we have maintained these services, the water mains specifically, to a very high standard. And now we're being asked by the county to reduce those standards. And it causes difficulties, because that's not the way that we've managed. And an example is the frequency of the exercising of water valves. We're able to maintain a frequency of like every 16 months, we can get to every valve and exercise it. Where the county maintains the water system outside the city, their frequency is probably on the order of 4 years. We don't believe 4 years is appropriate. We think that the system here in the city needs to be maintained to a higher standard, and so it's just a little bit of a friction point that we're starting to see where the county wants to influence service standards that would be lower than what we have done in the past.
I'm just wondering, is that point of principle that you mentioned with the Amanda an important enough one that it kind of should be promoted up here to the bridges one, which I've been sort of using as the summary page? Would it be appropriate to say one of the things that we need to do is that we need to ensure measures assign costs where appropriate on user pay rather than, I'm just going to say it colloquially right now, bury them in the levy? Is that an important enough thing to call it a general principle? Because the benefit of these slides that we've just been in down here, I think, is they get us thinking about other sort of weird examples. And David's just shared two really interesting points of friction. I think you've already got the questions of level of service principle built in here, but is this assignment of costs to user pay where appropriate another general principle, or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, I'm not sure I understand what your point is making here. Definitely user pay systems are different in my mind than services that are supported by the levy.
The point I'm making is you'd be happy to collaborate as in the Amanda circumstance, but if the county's going to set up something that you're collaborating on, better make sure you get the accounting right. Right?
Right.
That's what I meant. Sorry if my language wasn't transparent enough. That's a good example of, okay, good try. Let's try a different yellow sticky here. How about collaboration measures need to assign costs appropriately, e.g. Amanda example should be user fee driven, not levy driven. Is that better?
Right. Good.
John, if I could, I think David made 2 points and just want to make sure we got them both. The first is the well-established practice that as much as we can, we should have things that are otherwise going to be on the property tax base moved to a user charge fee or some other rate-based budget or something of that kind as a general practice. That's is better accountability to the taxpayer. Then the other comment he made was that the decision about adopting that software needs to be reflective of the fact that because it's a shared jurisdiction, that both sides need to agree to the reform, I guess, if you want to put it that way. Now I'm not as familiar with the Amanda system as he is, but I think it does go beyond building functions into things like rezonings and things of that kind, but I'm just not sure whether we got your whole point there, David. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, you're right, Michael. There was a process in my mind that was missed in terms of collaborating with the area municipalities. And you're right, there is a function of it with respect to the management of planning application businesses. But it's really, to me, that's really a very minor role. I can't imagine anybody buying Amanda to manage the business processes of planning applications. The county already had a system to manage those business processes. They didn't need Amanda. From my conversations with the planners, that this was not something they asked for or sought. And so there was an issue with respect. I believe the county just made unilaterally a decision that they were going with this product without seeking the input from the area municipalities.
How'd I do on this second orange one here? I've tried to sort of capture that as there needs to be collaborative decision-making around standards and tools. So for example, decisions about adoption of software in areas of shared jurisdiction need to be done collaboratively. Or shouldn't be done unilaterally, that kind of thing. So let me dive back down. That covers us off on this page. And so now we're into the two last pages. These are service improvements. The first bucket is service improvements not requiring additional investment. So these, a lot of them come under the heading of, fairly simple areas of increased collaboration, and we can just take a look at them together while I grab some yellow stickies here. Again, David, I'll invite you to comment on some of these because in a lot of cases, again, they're relatively small. There's one here relating to standardization of fees, which the CAOs, their comment was similar to previous comments we've seen on user fees. It's that, okay, well, we're going to continue to set fees as per the Municipal Act on a cost recovery basis. So that one didn't find favor. This next one was about implementation in building services. And the CAO commentary on it was that the CBOs should continue to meet to discuss common approaches across all of Oxford. So this is just people who collaborate should continue to do so. On emergency management, this one here relates to county emergency management coordinator's role, and it's to clarify the role of the county emergency coordinator and potentially move it to full-time if it could assist in coordination of local activities. So maybe I'll pause after those first three and see if anyone has any takers, but and seeing none, I'll go ahead, David.
Yeah, John, no, in terms of shared bylaw enforcement staff, it's difficult, but it's been actually done. The city did actually provide contracted bylaw services years ago to some of our neighboring townships. So there is historical practice of that. One of the things I think that many of us sometimes need is prosecutorial services. None of us have particularly big bylaw enforcement services, and when you have to proceed with POA action, finding someone to prosecute your matter is sometimes difficult. It would be nice to see a coordinated approach to prosecution services.
David, would that be like a contracted law firm, or would it be some member of, say, your city solicitor doing it on behalf of other people, or what were your thinking on that?
At times we will use city solicitor, but it's a very expensive approach, and we do whatever we can to avoid that. It would be a contract law firm or paralegal in some cases. Could certainly handle the type of work that we would be, needing, and it would be very infrequent, likely.
I'll jump on to the next three. This one may be of interest. It's around, well, if you're thinking about transit down the road, the idea that to the greatest degree possible, the urban municipalities should be kind of thinking in a holistic fashion about this to improve their chances of overall success in funding applications. But there should be, degree of coordination in terms of that kind I know that can be kind of far down the road, but it seems relatively straightforward that being coordinated is better than not being coordinated. So, David, you may have a greater insight into that one.
Yeah, this one has actually been a recent flashpoint in terms of the county proposing to operate a northern intercommunity transit system. It came as a surprise to us because they didn't raise the ambition of them wanting to be a service provider for transit services through this entire service delivery review. It just came out of the blue last year, just after this service delivery review had made its rounds around all the area municipalities in the county. And at that point, we advised the county that if they wish to get into the transit service delivery business, that they're certainly welcome to, but they need to go through the triple majority process, because right now it's not a sphere of jurisdiction that gives them that opportunity. And it's something that Woodstock would be welcome to go through. But the county decided that they would rather use an interpretation of the Municipal Act that their participation financially supporting a transit system would come in the form of a grant, and so relieve them of the spheres of jurisdiction restriction.
So does this point us to a more general principle? Like, here's an important area of service. I mean, transit, can really be life-altering or community-altering. Should be a positive initiative, and as you said, you would have been more than happy to talk about it, but the way in which it was brought forward became itself part of the issue. Is there another general principle here that sort of actually asserts the importance of coordinated planning, coordinated collaborative planning among upper and lower tiers for this sort of thing? Or what do you think? Is there something else that belongs up in the summary that not just buried down here in the detailed notes?
I think I would put on it that transportation is not a responsibility of the upper tier, so it shouldn't even be here, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is costing us a lot of money because it's not even in their sphere of delivery whatsoever. So I'm not even sure why it's on here. And as our CAO pointed out, they sprung this crazy thing on us after all this. And this is they haven't even adopted doing this report. So I would remove transit, because I think it's a complete waste of time. It's not in the sphere of the upper tier. So that's and I think we've been very vocal in Woodstock period on this. Our council has been unique, well, except for one vote. We're all in agreement on this.
So perhaps the general principle is whatever we do, we should respect the jurisdictional spheres.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I agree with that.
I agree there too.
There's probably quite a number of issues that you could add that to, but this is one right now.
Well, look, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna pop it up to the top as being another, because we're looking for the general enablers of what's going to make things work, right? So.
No, I that's probably one of the first issues is the county should not be in. They need to look at what their jurisdiction is and not get into items that have not their jurisdiction. So they're putting that on all the taxpayers of Oxford County.
Collaboration's good, but let's not collaborate if it's not respectful of jurisdictional spheres, because it's not an appropriate thing to be exploring in the first place. So there's a few more here. Happy to take your comments on them, and I can just take you through them. On water, development of a procedure for changes to the water system. The recommendation there was to continue ongoing discussions. Again, David may know the backstory on some of these things in a way that we don't. So, we don't need to delve into all of them, but David, if there's anything here that triggers more useful commentary that belongs kind of in our general principles, then by all means, it adds a lot of value to have you to share that in. They're on stormwater management, ponds, maintenance. This is, predominantly a rural matter and was recommended by the CAOs to treat it as such. There was we ought to encourage backyard composting recommendation with no particular implementation plan attached to it. Another rural one in regard to municipal drains. On cultural service, there was a recommendation that there be opportunities be explored to collaborate across neighboring municipalities to create links in the sharing of space and economic development and tourism generally. And that municipalities, CAOs concluded that municipalities should work together on matters, I think where they see fit. So it was a recommendation of collaboration there among willing partners. Similarly with trails, that municipalities work cooperatively around maintenance of trails. But again, I think that was people participate based on their willingness to participate. The economic development one is interesting. It's to establish and share investment leads. And the recommendation from the CAOs was that where there's benefit to all, that the municipalities should collaborate and work together. I don't know if there's any comment on any of those ones I just kind of whipped through, but happy to take it if it's triggered any thoughts with you.
The one I was thinking about on the backyard composting, again, that's okay in the rural areas or small villages in the areas where they have maybe larger lots, but in the city of Woodstock, to have backyard composting brings vermin and unwanted animals in from wherever, the country or wherever. So I don't see is that something that we can have in Woodstock, but that's my opinion on that topic.
And John, maybe just to add some more to what Councillor Lauters indicated, the backyard composting is definitely the cheapest diversion that we can hope to get. But as Councillor Lauter indicates, it's urban environment with the much more dense population. It makes it difficult. In some cases, not everybody has this opportunity. And Woodstock, I think, is the only municipality in the county under the recent provincial new rules that will be required to actually implement a green waste system. I don't think we hit the threshold necessarily for curbside, but we need to have a service where residents can get rid of green waste separately from their just regular garbage. I'm not sure there's any real way to do that other than a curbside delivery of service. So it's something that we have to be starting to look into. I think it's within the next 5 years we're required to roll out this service enhancement. So it's just in the very initial stages. So we are, I think, different from the other municipalities in the county in this regard.
Any other comments, David? I whipped through a whole bunch there. Fine if there's not. But.
No.
So the last page is in many respects the most challenging to talk about. These are opportunities for service improvement, but they actually require additional investment. And so these are ones where, they could be great ideas, but they would normally go through a detailed budgeting process. And so we sort of present them for completeness, but without any great expectation that it goes anywhere, because we understand there's a very disciplined process for dealing with things like this. And people don't make $500,000 expenditures on the basis of a couple of bullet points on a slide. So it's really just to sort of see if there's anything that is of particular interest, I guess. I would also just make one apology. In order to protect our eyes, I combined the two columns that would normally be separate. The reason why one-time capital cost and 75,000, and this is the same 75,000 down here. The reason it's in one column with all the operating cost savings, or sorry, expenditures, is just because that way I could make it one column, and that way it would fit on the page instead of two. So I didn't mean to obscure the difference between annual costs and one-time costs. It's just there's only one. This is it, and then it's down here again. The others are annual costs. And as you can see, the first relates to a common system for road notifications on the 511 system, and the recommendation from the CAOs was that all municipalities participate in the 511 system. The second one relates to the county-wide voice over internet protocol system, and the recommendation was that municipalities that are not in it join when it makes sense to them. There's a recommendation around additional fire inspectors, and you can see it's quite a range in terms of the number of inspectors that they'd be looking at. This one doesn't really apply to you, but the recommendation of the CAOs was that this be done locally, collaboratively if possible. In regard to the roads, bridges file, again, there was a recommendation that a standardized boundary agreement be put in place. This one did meet favor from the CAOs that yes, there should be a template boundary road agreement. There was a recommendation around cemeteries that some collective work be done around transfer reserves. And this was not recommended by CAOs. On Parks and Rec, there was talk about, additional staff, the CIO said each municipality should take a look at their own needs on this through their own recreation plans, that it's not appropriate to do this collectively or through the county. The libraries one was interesting. It recommended the integrating of systems between the county and the Woodstock Library, relatively small expenditure. The CAOs recommended that this be shared with the library boards for their consideration. And then finally, there was a recommendation around additional resources at the county to support the planning process in order to allow it to be able to work more at the expected pace of decision making and business that proponents would have, rather than, I guess there's a notion here that it wasn't moving quickly enough. And so you can see there was a fairly wide estimate of the amount of resources that might be needed to improve that. That would represent quite a range in the number of actual personnel. So those initiatives were all things that were identified by the study, but don't know if anybody has any specific comments on them, but obviously they're relatively sketchy proposals relative to the dollars involved, and so one would expect to see those things come through in the normal course.
Just make a comment on the libraries. Both Councillor Tate and I sit on the library board, and that was brought up at our library board, and it was voted on that we would just remain the same. We didn't want anything to change for the Woodstock Library Board.
All right, that's actually good to know. I hadn't heard that yet. Any other comments on
this? Just for clarification, on the fire and additional fire inspectors, that does not relate to anything, and like you're saying here, for Blenheim, Eastside, Tavistock, so on. So we would not be participating in anything to do with additional fire inspectors. Is that?
That's right. And in fact, the CAO recommendation was, if you need this, look at it yourself.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Well, you have been very patient and very efficient. And as a result, you've gotten through a little bit early here. I think we've done a good job of kind of summarizing as we go. And so what I will just do is bring this back up and see if there's anything else that's come to mind. But otherwise, I know you've looked at it already with you to summarizing it a couple of times, and so I won't belabor the point. I think what you're telling Michael and me to report back to the county is that Woodstock's got a great history of being a partner in collaboration, that it's done so for years, both formally and informally. Always interested in ideas that are business case driven. But that being said, would prefer to focus on the most promising as opposed to just endlessly reviewing things that have already been considered. That it's not just about savings, it's about service. That there can be other ancillary benefits of ending confusion over who does what, and that this can be very beneficial to the public and also just simplify communication and the like. But that we need to see overall benefit backed up by business cases. But the other thing is, when considering things, we should be respectful of jurisdictional spheres. We should ensure that collaborations assign costs appropriately and don't bury things on the levy that should otherwise be directed in other ways. In other words, we need to be prudent and in the way in which we do share costs and services. We need to always be thinking about the disposition of assets and the impact on the capital side of operational decisions. And we need to have due regard to urban and rural service standards and just generally be like collaboration. You can't be collaborative without being collaborative. And so if you're going to collaborate, collaborate and get the right people around the table before making a decision. Collaboration isn't making a unilateral decision and expecting other people to implement it over time. I think that's the summary that I would take away from what you had to tell us that we would be reporting out on, other than the sort of specific things that are, related to the specific proposals. But does that seem like a fair summary of what we learned from you today?
Yeah, I think so. David, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's good. I agree.
Well, Madam Chair, I am pleased to give you 18 minutes back.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can get out for my walk now. And so I just want to, I think this has been a very worthwhile exercise. I think that we've stated our position, and I want to thank David for stepping in and helping us out on some of the background and history of some of these issues. And I want to thank John and Michael for putting this workshop together. And John, I just had to tell you, my maiden name is Matheson. So anyhow, if there isn't anything else, I will ask for an adjournment. And I guess there's just the two of us, so we'll adjourn. Thank you ever so much.